There's a moment just before the sun rises, when the world holds its breath. The trees stand like silent sentinels, their leaves trembling with secrets older than written history. If you've ever stood in a forest at dawn, you've felt it, the eerie, electric sense that you're not just surrounded by nature, but by something far more profound. For thousands of years, our ancestors didn't just live in the natural world. They spoke to it, worshipped it, and saw it as a mirror of the divine. Today, we're going to uncover the hidden threads that connect ancient rituals to the very earth beneath our feet, revealing how these sacred bonds shaped the course of human civilization. Think about the last time you walked through a grove of ancient trees or stood at the edge of a rushing river. There's a reason these places feel different, charged with an energy that defies explanation. Long before cities and temples, humanity's first cathedrals were the forests, the mountains, and the stars. From the druids who whispered prayers to oak trees to the shamans who danced under the moon, every culture in every corner of the world shared one unshakable truth: nature was alive and it was listening. But how did these beliefs shape the rituals that defined entire societies? And why do these ancient connections still resonate with us today, even in our modern world? This journey will take us deep into the heart of forgotten ceremonies, where rivers were seen as gods and stones held the voices of ancestors. We'll decode the hidden meanings behind sacred landscapes, from spiraling stone circles to caverns painted with the handprints of those long gone. But more than that, we'll rediscover what it means to listen, to truly hear the whispers of the earth as our ancestors once did. Because somewhere between the rustling leaves and the crackling firelight, there's a truth waiting to be remembered. A truth that doesn't just belong to the past, but to all of us. So let's step into the forest together and begin. Among the towering oaks and whispering leaves of sacred groves, time moves differently. These weren't just clusters of trees, they were portals. When a druid stepped into an oak grove, they believed they were walking into the very veins of the world, where roots touched the realm of ancestors and branches cradled the voices of gods. In Japan, Shinto priests still tie sacred ropes around ancient trees, marking them as homes for kami spirits that breathe within the wind and rustle through bamboo leaves. What made these places so powerful wasn't just their beauty, but their liminality. They existed on the threshold between worlds, where a single ritual could ripple through the unseen. Consider the olive groves of ancient Greece, where priestesses of Athena gathered under silver leaves to interpret the will of the gods. Or the banyan trees of India, their sprawling roots forming natural temples where sages meditated for years, believing enlightenment could rise from the soil itself. Every culture that revered these groves shared a profound understanding. Trees were more than plants. They were elders. They were witnesses. Their rings held the memory of droughts and floods, of wars and peace treaties, of prayers offered in desperation and gratitude. When people left offerings, honey, cloth, even the first fruits of a harvest, they weren't just giving gifts. They were speaking a language older than words, one that said, "We remember. We honor, we belong to you as you belong to us." The rituals performed in these groves were conversations with the unseen. Celtic druids carved ogham symbols into birch bark, turning trees into living scrolls. In West Africa, dancers circled silk cotton trees, their movements mimicking roots reaching downward and branches stretching skyward. Even the silence had meaning. Some Nordic traditions held that the best prayers weren't spoken aloud, but whispered into the hollows of ancient yews, letting the tree carry them upward. This wasn't superstition, it was ecology of the soul. people understood that to protect a sacred grove was to protect the balance of life itself. Today, scientists are uncovering why these groves felt so alive. Mycorrhizal networks, often called the Wood Wide Web, connect trees through underground fungal threads, allowing them to share nutrients and warnings. A forest isn't just a collection of individuals, it's a community. Our ancestors sensed this truth long before microscopes revealed it. They knew groves thrived on reciprocity. You couldn't take without giving back. That's why so many traditions demanded care. A single branch cut for ritual required planting 10 new saplings. A prayer for rain meant also pledging to safeguard the river. The echoes of these practices linger. In Ireland, some still tie cloth to clootie trees near holy wells, a faint memory of old offerings. In Kyoto, the rustle of bamboo in Sagano Forest still draws those seeking peace. These groves remind us that spirituality wasn't separate from nature, it was rooted in it. To stand in a sacred grove today is to stand where countless generations before you once stood, their hopes pressed into the bark, their whispers tangled in the leaves. The trees remember. The question is, do we? The night sky was humanity's first clock, its first calendar, its first sacred text. Imagine standing in the open desert thousands of years ago, watching the stars shift like grains of sand in an hourglass. For ancient cultures, these celestial movements weren't just observations, they were divine instructions. When the builders of Stonehenge hauled those massive blue stones across hundreds of miles, they weren't just creating a monument. They were crafting a stone hymn to the solstice, a place where the rising sun would slide perfectly between the pillars like a key turning in a lock. That moment wasn't merely symbolic, it told them when to plant, when to harvest, when to honor the gods. The stones were silent astronomers, their shadows measuring the pulse of the earth itself. The Maya took this even further. Their pyramids weren't just temples, they were precision instruments. At Chichen Itza during the equinoxes, the setting sun cast shadows that slither like a serpent down the steps of El Castillo. This wasn't an accident, it was a meticulously calculated display, a way of stitching the heavens into the very fabric of daily life. Priests used these alignments to predict eclipses, to time sacred ceremonies, even to determine when to go to war. For them, the stars were a language, and every eclipse or comet was a message from the gods. Then there's Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. To the ancient Egyptians, its appearance just before dawn, what we call the heliacal rising, was the universe's alarm clock. It signaled the Nile's annual flood, the event that would deposit rich, life-giving silt across the fields. Entire religious ceremonies revolved around this moment. Priests would wait on temple rooftops, scanning the horizon for that first glimmer. When it came, the celebrations began offerings to Hapi, the river god, dances to honor the fertility of the land, prayers for the year ahead. This wasn't just astronomy, it was survival. The rhythm of the stars dictated the rhythm of their lives. What's astonishing is how many cultures arrived at the same conclusion independently. The Nabta Playa stone circle in the Sahara, older than Stonehenge by thousands of years, tracked the summer solstice for nomadic cattle herders. In China, the Forbidden City's layout mirrors celestial patterns, aligning with the pole star to reinforce the emperor's divine mandate. Even today, the Dogon people of Mali preserve star knowledge so precise it includes details about Sirius's invisible companion star, something modern telescopes only confirmed in the 19th century. These celestial rituals reveal a profound truth. Our ancestors didn't see a separation between the practical and the sacred. A solstice wasn't just a date, it was a conversation with the cosmos. The stars were teachers, the moon a metronome, the sun a covenant. In a world without artificial light, the heavens were alive, pulsing with meaning. Maybe that's why standing under a starry sky still fills us with awe. Somewhere deep in our bones we remember, the night sky isn't just above us, it's part of us. And those ancient rituals, they weren't just marking time. They were reminding us we belong to something vast, something eternal. A wolf howl cutting through the stillness of night wasn't just a sound, it was a voice. For the Lakota people, the wolf was a teacher, its pack loyalty shaping tribal laws. In the jungles of the Amazon, jaguars were seen as shapeshifters, their spotted coats believed to hold the secrets of the spirit world. Animals weren't merely creatures to ancient cultures, they were living bridges between Earth and the divine, carrying messages humans couldn't decipher alone. Take the serpent, coiled and mysterious. To the Maya, Kukulkan wasn't just a feathered snake deity, it was the embodiment of celestial knowledge, its sinuous form mirroring the path of the Milky Way. When Aztec priests donned rattlesnake skins during ceremonies, they weren't disguising themselves, they were becoming conduits, letting the serpent's ancient wisdom flow through their chants and movements. Half a world away, Norse shamans wore wolf pelts to enter trance states, believing the animal's fierce intuition would guide them through the 9 realms. These weren't costumes, they were transformations. Egypt's reverence for cats reveals something deeper about this bond. Bastet, the feline goddess, wasn't just worshipped because cats killed vermin. They were cherished for their otherworldly grace, their eyes reflecting moonlight, their silence hinting at secrets. Killing a cat, even accidentally, carried a death penalty. Meanwhile, in India, the sacred cow became a walking symbol of abundance. Every part of its existence, from milk to dung, was considered a gift, a reminder that sustenance and spirituality were intertwined. The Ainu people of Japan took this further. Before hunting a bear, they'd raise the cub as family, singing to it and feeding it ceremonial meals. When the time came, they believed the bear's spirit would willingly return to the mountain gods carrying their prayers. This wasn't just hunting, it was a sacred exchange, a recognition that life required reciprocity. Similarly, Maori carvers shaped whalebone into high tiki pendants, wearing the ocean's strength close to their hearts. What united these traditions was humility. The Haida of the Pacific Northwest didn't just carve totem poles as art. They were ancestral records, with ravens representing trickster wisdom and orcas symbolizing family unity. To wear an animal's likeness was to carry its lessons, the patience of a turtle, the courage of an eagle, the adaptability of a fox. These weren't symbols of dominance but of kinship. Modern science now confirms what intuition once told our ancestors. Wolves regulate ecosystems, elephants mourn their dead, crows solve puzzles. The lines we drew between human and animal were always blurrier than we thought. Perhaps that's why encountering a deer in the woods still makes us pause. Some ancient part of us remembers they were never just animals, they were guides. Fire wasn't just a tool, it was a living thing. Watch a flame long enough and you'll understand why the Zoroastrians built eternal fires in their temples, believing the flickering light held the presence of Ahura Mazda, the divine wisdom. In ancient Persia, tending the sacred fire wasn't a chore, it was a meditation. The fire's hunger for wood, its dance in the darkness, its power to turn offerings into smoke. These weren't metaphors. They were proof that the divine lived in the spark and the ember. Halfway across the world, the Lakota sweat lodge ceremonies used glowing stones to summon the spirits of ancestors, the steam rising like prayers made visible. Fire didn't just cleanse, it transformed. Now think of water, not as H2O, but as a mirror of the cosmos. When Hindu devotees pour milk over Shiva's lingam, they aren't just honoring a god. They're recreating the myth of the celestial river Ganga, tumbling from heaven to earth. In Japan, Shinto priests still dip sakaki branches into water, scattering droplets to purify spaces in a ritual called misogi. The act echoes the very first myths where gods stirred the primordial ocean to bring forth life. Even baptism, with its plunge into holy water, carries this ancient memory. Water doesn't just wash away sins, it rebirths. Then there's Earth, the silent alchemist. The Inca didn't just farm potatoes, they whispered prayers to Pachamama before planting, burying offerings of coca leaves to thank the soil for its generosity. In Ireland, farmers would circle their fields with torches during Beltane, not just to bless the crops but to awaken the land from winter's sleep. The earth wasn't dirt. It was a womb. That's why traditional Chinese graves face hills or rivers, to keep the dead cradled in the landscape's energy. When we walk barefoot on grass today, that tingling sensation isn't just nerves. It's the oldest conversation of all, and air, it's the most invisible element yet the most traveled. Tibetan wind horse flags don't just flutter prettily in the breeze. Each ripple sends prayers spinning into the sky, carried by the same winds that once filled the sails of Phoenician ships voyaging to unknown lands. The Sioux understood this when they smoked the chanunpa, the sacred pipe, watching their exhaled breath merge with the wind. Air wasn't empty space, it was the breath of the gods, the whisperer of omens. Even now, when a sudden gust chills your neck on a still day, some ancient part of you tenses. The air is speaking. What's extraordinary is how these elements refuse to stay in their categories. The Yoruba river goddess Oshun is also a goddess of fire, her waters said to burn with healing heat. Hawaiian lava flows were both earth and fire, hardening into new land while Peele's myths warned of creation's double edge. The elements blurred because life blurs. Rain is air turning to water, a campfire is wood becoming light. Ancient rituals honored this alchemy. They didn't just use the elements. They surrendered to them. Modern eco-spirituality rediscovers this wisdom. When a climate activist sits in a redwood's branches or a surfer blesses the waves before riding them, they're reviving the oldest ritual of all, reciprocity. Not domination, not fear, a dialogue, because fire still purifies, water still remembers, earth still holds, and air still carries. The elements haven't changed. Only our listening has. The turning of the seasons wasn't just a change in weather, it was the heartbeat of the sacred. When the Celts lit bonfires on hilltops during Samhain, they weren't just celebrating the end of harvest. They were stepping into a threshold, a moment when the veil between the living and the dead grew thin enough to whisper through. This wasn't superstition. It was a profound recognition that life and death were part of the same cycle, like leaves falling only to nourish the roots below. Across the world in Persia, Nowruz erupted with the spring equinox, its Haft-Sin table overflowing with sprouting wheat and hyacinths, not just as decoration, but as a living vow to renewal. Every blossom on that table was a promise. As the earth wakes, so do we. These festivals weren't arbitrary. They were meticulous alignments with the earth's rhythms. The ancient Egyptians timed their Wepet Renpet festival to the Nile's flood, a liquid new year that brought both water and wonder. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs celebrated the fiery return of the sun during the winter solstice with Toxhumalpilya, a ceremony where priests kindled new flames in the chest cavities of sacrificial victims. Gruesome to modern eyes, but to them, it was the ultimate act of reciprocity, life given to keep the cosmos turning. Even Stone Age farmers marked the solstices with stone circles, their alignment so precise they still catch the sun's first rays thousands of years later. What's startling is how these rituals mirrored each other across continents. The Japanese Obon festival, where lanterns guide ancestral spirits home, echoes Mexico's Dia de los Muertos, both celebrations of the dead woven into the fabric of the living. The Germanic Yule log burned to summon the sun's return, finds its twin in the Zuni tribe's Shalako ceremony, where towering Kachina masks dance to beckon back the light. These weren't coincidences, they were shared truths whispered by the land itself. Today's holidays still carry these echoes, though we've often forgotten their roots. Christmas trees adorned with lights descend from the evergreen boughs hung in Roman Saturnalia to defy winter's gloom. Thanksgiving's feast mirrors the Pawnee's corn dances, where every kernel was a prayer for continued abundance. Even Halloween's jack-o'-lanterns hark back to the Celtic tradition of carving turnips to ward off wandering spirits. The symbols remain, but something vital has faded: the awareness that these weren't just traditions but covenants. Perhaps that's why standing in a sunflower field at midsummer or watching the first snowfall still stirs something in us. These moments aren't just beautiful, they're ancestral. The solstices and equinoxes aren't merely calendar dates but cosmic doorways, inviting us to remember what our ancestors knew. Time isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, and every turn brings us back to the sacred. The shaman's drumbeat wasn't just rhythm, it was a heartbeat syncing with the earth's own pulse. Picture a Siberian Tungus shaman crouched in a birch bark tent, the air thick with the scent of smoldering juniper. As the drum's steady thrum lulls them into a trance, they don't just hallucinate, they voyage. Rivers speak in currents of sound, trees stretch their roots like fingers through time. A stone might murmur secrets of a drought 10 generations past. This wasn't fantasy. To the shaman, these were conversations as real as the fire's crackle, revelations woven into the fabric of existence itself. Consider the Shipibo people of the Amazon. Their intricate geometric designs more than art, they're maps of ayahuasca visions, blueprints of the spirit world's architecture. When a shaman drank the bitter brew, they didn't just see patterns, they heard the plants sing. Each vine, each leaf hummed with curative knowledge, revealing which combinations could mend a broken bone or soothe a fevered mind. Modern science now confirms what these rituals long understood. The rainforest is a pharmacy. Over 60% of our medicines trace back to plant compounds, many first identified through indigenous plant wisdom. The shaman's trance wasn't escapism, it was field work. In the Sonoran Desert, the Huicol people still trek hundreds of miles to harvest peyote, their sacred cactus. The ritual isn't casual. Pilgrims fast and pray for days before consuming the small, bitter buttons. Why? Because the visions that follow aren't entertainment, they're diagnostics. A shaman might see a village's coming famine in the cactus's prickly glow or spot the herbal antidote to a child's wasting sickness in the swirl of colors. The Cheyenne tell of buffalo appearing in peyote visions, leading hunters to herds during lean winters. These weren't coincidences, they were collaborations between human and landscape, a dialogue older than agriculture. Even the tools of the trade were nature's gifts. The Sami shamans of Scandinavia used drums painted with red ochre, their surfaces depicting the three realms: sky, earth, underworld, linked by the world tree. Striking the drumskin summoned the wind's voice, the reindeer's breath, the crack of ice on distant lakes. In Mongolia, shamans still wear mirrors forged from meteoric iron, believing the metal carries celestial power to deflect evil spirits. Every item was chosen not for convenience, but because the natural world whispered, "This will help you listen." What's striking is how these traditions mirror modern science's discoveries. Mycelium networks act as fungal shamans, transferring nutrients between trees like healing remedies. Birds navigate by reading the Earth's magnetic fields, an invisible map no less mystical than a shaman's spirit journey. We've replaced the drumbeat with EEG machines, but the truth remains. Nature communicates in ways we're only beginning to decode. Perhaps that's why shamanic rituals persist. from neon-lit ayahuasca ceremonies in Lima to sweat lodges rising in suburban backyards. They remind us that wisdom isn't just stored in books or labs, but in the rustle of leaves, the taste of bitter roots, the patterns only visible when we close our eyes and let the earth speak. The shaman's greatest lesson wasn't about controlling nature, but surrendering to its teachings, one drumbeat, one vision, one whispered rock song at a time. The first flutes weren't carved from wood or bone, they were made from the hollow reeds that whispered along riverbanks. When an early human lifted one to their lips and blew, they weren't just making music. They were answering the wind, from the guttural drone of the Aboriginal didgeridoo, shaped by termites and mimicking the growl of a dingo, to the Tibetan singing bowls whose vibrations ripple like echoes down a glacial valley. Ritual music didn't imitate nature. It channeled it. Take the rainstick found from the Andes to the Sahara, filled with pebbles or seeds. Its sound wasn't just a pleasant rattle, it was invocation. Shamanic traditions from the Amazon to Mongolia shook these instruments to summon storms, believing the sound could coax clouds from the sky. The Maori Putatara shell trumpet, carved from the spiraling conch, didn't just signal war, its wail was meant to carry the voice of Tangaroa, god of the sea. Even the Greek aulos, a double-piped reed instrument, was said to channel the breath of Dionysus, its frenzied notes sparking ecstatic dances under olive trees. Rhythm, too, was borrowed from the earth. The Yoruba talking drums mirrored the tonal patterns of human speech, but their cadence came from the monsoon's staccato downpour. Inuit throat singers in the Arctic wove their duets to mimic the creak of sea ice and the panting of sled dogs, and the taiko drums of Japan, their thunder didn't just resemble storms, it synchronized with them. Priests timed performances to approaching typhoons, believing the drumbeats could temper the wind's fury. What's extraordinary is how these sounds transcended geography. The Aboriginal corroboree, with its clapsticks keeping time like cracking branches, finds an uncanny parallel in the Celtic bodhran, whose goatskin head was stretched to mimic the cadence of galloping stags. The Navajo night chants, rising and falling scales, mirror the howl of desert coyotes, just as Siberian shaman's throat singing replicates the overlapping harmonics of wind through steppe grass. These weren't coincidences, they were proof that every culture, when listening deeply, heard the same universal score written in rainfall and birdsong. Modern studies reveal why these sounds resonate so deeply. Binaural beats, the auditory illusion created by two slightly different frequencies, can induce meditative states, much like the drone of a didgeridoo. Forest soundscapes lower cortisol levels more effectively than white noise. Our brains are wired to find meaning in nature's acoustics because, for millennia, survival depended on it. The crack of a twig signaled predator or prey. The shift in wind tone warned of storms. Music wasn't just art, it was an extension of that primal listening. Perhaps that's why certain melodies still give us chills. A lone flute in a quiet room can feel like standing in a moonlit grove. The deep toll of a temple bell carries the weight of a mountainside. These sounds bypass logic and speak directly to some ancient part of us that remembers before words, before cities. We were all just listeners in the great, singing wild. The lotus flower doesn't just grow in mud, it thrives in it. Rising each morning from murky waters, its petals untouched by the filth below, it became Buddhism's ultimate symbol of enlightenment. But this wasn't just poetry. Monks meditating on lotus imagery weren't admiring a metaphor. They were studying a living lesson in resilience, a plant that proved beauty could emerge from darkness. Half a world away, the Vedas spoke of Soma, a golden-hued plant so sacred its juice was pressed into ritual drinks, granting warriors the strength of gods and poets the words of the divine. Modern scholars still debate whether soma was fly agaric mushroom, ephedra, or something lost to time, but its power was undeniable. To drink it was to step into a world where the boundaries between human and heaven dissolved. Then there's the Oracle of Delphi perched on her tripod above those mysterious fissures. The ethylene gas rising from the earth didn't just induce trances, it was considered the very breath of Gaia, the Earth Mother. Her cryptic prophecies shaped empires, all because a rootless vapor guided her tongue. Meanwhile, in the Amazon, the yagé vine and chacruna leaves combined to brew ayahuasca, a concoction so potent it was called the vine of the soul. Shamans didn't consume it to escape reality, but to dive deeper into the fabric of existence, where jaguar spirits taught healing songs and ancestor voices hummed in the dark. What unites these traditions is the understanding that plants weren't passive ingredients, they were active participants. The peyote cactus didn't just contain mescaline, it offered visions to the Huacol people in precise, teachable patterns, geometric landscapes where every angle held meaning. The iboga root of Central Africa, chewed during Biwiti initiation rites, didn't just hallucinate. It revealed entire genealogies, letting initiates walk alongside their forebears as if time were a spiral rather than a line. Even humble sage, burned in smudging ceremonies from Tibet to Turtle Island, was believed to carry prayers upward on its smoke, a botanical telegraph system connecting earth to sky. Modern science now confirms what ritualists knew instinctively. The psilocybin in magic mushrooms stimulates neurogenesis, literally regrowing brain cells. Willow bark chewed by Neolithic shamans for pain relief gave us aspirin, the rosy periwinkle of Madagascar, long used in folk medicine, now treats childhood leukemia. These aren't coincidences, they're proof that the earth curated its own pharmacy long before humans labeled it. Yet something vital has been lost in translation. When a pharmaceutical company isolates a plant compound to patent it, they extract more than a molecule, they strip away the context. Traditional healers never administered plants in isolation. Ayahuasca's power comes from the synergy of two species. The AMAO inhibitors in the vine unlock the DMT in the leaves. It's a reminder that nature's wisdom often lies in relationship, not reduction. Perhaps that's why urbanites today are planting rooftop mandala gardens or microdosing psilocybin in therapist offices. We're relearning what our ancestors never forgot: plants aren't commodities. They're allies. To sit with them, whether in meditation, ceremony, or quiet observation, is to enter a conversation that began millennia before the first cities rose. The lotus still blooms in sludge, the vines still whisper. The question is whether we've kept our ears open. Mountains don't just scrape the sky, they pierce the veil between worlds. When the ancient Greeks placed their gods atop Olympus, they weren't choosing a random peak. They recognized something primal about high places, where the air thins and the world below shrinks to insignificance. To stand on a summit is to straddle realms, your feet planted in stone, your face brushed by clouds that might as well be the breath of deities. This wasn't poetic fancy. From the lightning storms crackling over Fuji to the burning bush atop Sinai, mountains manifested the divine in ways no flatland ever could. The act of climbing itself was a ritual. Tibetan Buddhists still circle Mount Kailash on their knees, believing each circuit erases a lifetime of sins. The Inca sacrificed children on Andean summits, their frozen bodies preserved like offerings in a celestial larder. Even the simple cairns hikers stack today echo ancient practices, every stone a silent prayer, balanced by countless hands before yours. These weren't just markers. They were contracts with the wind, trusting it to carry intentions upward. In Nepal, colorful prayer flags tatter over passes, their mantras dissolving into the jet stream like ink in holy water. The higher you go, the closer your whispers get to whatever listens. What's fascinating is how these beliefs converged across continents. The Maori tell of Tain separating earth and sky by propping up Ranganui with sacred mountains. The Navajo speak of Tsebi adjective Iacutship rock as a petrified bird that carried their ancestors to safety. In Japan, pilgrims in white robes still ascend Fuji's volcanic slopes at night to greet the sunrise at dawn, a practice called goreiko. That moment when the first light spills over the horizon, it's not just a view, it's communion. Modern mountaineers often report strange phenomena at altitude, visions of companions who aren't there, euphoria unrelated to oxygen levels. Scientists call it hypoxia, but climbers sometimes call it something else, the mountain speaking. Reinhold Messner swore the Dolomites whispered to him in his mother tongue. Sherpas leave rice offerings in crevices to appease the Yeti like Mygo who guard the heights. Even secular hikers describe summits as cathedrals of rock, instinctively reaching for sacred language when ordinary words fail. Perhaps that's why we still climb, not just to conquer but to surrender, to feel small under a bowl of stars no city light can dim. Mountains remind us that transcendence isn't found in comfort, but in the ache of thinning air, the burn of muscles pushing upward. Every step is an echo of those who climbed before us, not for sport, but because they knew something we're still remembering. The highest places aren't escapes from the world. They're bridges to whatever lies beyond it. Crawling into a cave isn't just entering darkness, it's stepping into the Earth's memory. The flickering torchlight on Lascaux' walls didn't just illuminate bison and mammoths, it brought them to life, their ochre shadows dancing as if the artists knew the stone itself would breathe motion into their work. These weren't paintings, they were portals for the shamans who traced their hands over the rough limestone, leaving palm prints in negative space. The cave wasn't a gallery. It was a throat swallowing them deeper into the belly of creation. In India's Elephanta caves, the silence is so thick you can hear your own pulse echo off the basalt. Here, the Hindu god Shiva towers in relief, his three faces embodying creation, preservation, and destruction, a trinity carved directly into the living rock. Pilgrims didn't just visit this place, they entered it like a womb, emerging reborn after hours of chanting in the pitch-black inner sanctum. The stalactites dripping from the ceiling weren't geological accidents. They were stone tears marking where the earth wept wisdom. The Maya understood this intimacy with the underground. Their cenotes flooded sinkholes were both water sources and sacred thresholds. When a priest threw jade offerings into the turquoise depths, he wasn't just appeasing the rain god Chok. He was sending gifts to Xibalba, the underworld, where ancestors waited in the roots of ceiba trees. Modern divers still find skulls and gold bells resting on those submerged ledges, placed with such care it's clear. Drowning wasn't a tragedy here, it was a homecoming. Even the act of descending held meaning. In Crete, initiates crawled through the labyrinthine tunnels of the Psychro cave, their knees scraping against stone worn smooth by centuries of seekers. At the bottom, they'd find a glossy black pool, the same one where baby Zeus was said to have been bathed by nymphs. Dipping their hands in, they weren't just touching water. They were touching time. Meanwhile, in Kentucky's Mammoth Cave, Cherokee elders once guided youths through total darkness for days, teaching them to navigate by the sound of dripping water and the scent of damp clay. Survival training, yes, but also a lesson in listening to the earth's whispers. What's haunting is how these caves mirrored the human body. The winding passages like intestines, the underground lakes like amniotic fluid, the stalagmites rising like vertebrae. No wonder so many cultures saw caves as birthing places. The Dogon of Mali tell of their ancestors emerging from the Bandiagara cliffs. the Pueblo peoples speak of Sipapu, a small hole in the kiva floor representing the portal through which humans first climbed into this world. To enter a cave was to reverse the journey to return to where life began. Today, we've traded torches for headlamps, but the pull remains. In France's Chauvet Cave, closed to the public to preserve its 30,000-year-old art, scientists work in hushed reverence, their headlights catching the sparkle of calcite over a lion's mane. In New Zealand's Waitomo Caves, tourists float in silence beneath constellations of glowworms, their blue light reflecting on the water like a drowned sky. These moments still catch our breath because somewhere in our bones we remember caves weren't just shelters, they were sanctuaries. The dark wasn't empty. It was full of answers. Perhaps that's why we're drawn to campfire stories of subterranean monsters or childhood forts made under blankets. The oldest part of us still believes what our ancestors knew, that truth doesn't always live in the light. Sometimes it waits in the quiet places where the only sound is your own heartbeat echoing back at you, saying, "Listen, the earth is speaking." A river doesn't just flow, it remembers. When a Hindu pilgrim submerges themselves in the Ganges at Varanasi, they aren't just bathing. They're stepping into a current thick with centuries of prayers, ashes, and marigold offerings, each ripple carrying the weight of 1,000,000 hopes. This isn't just water, it's liquid time. The same drops that once touched the fingertips of Mughal emperors and wandering sadhus now brush against their skin, connecting them to everyone who ever knelt at the river's edge. And when they pour the ashes of a loved one into those swirling depths, they're not saying goodbye. They're returning a borrowed body to the source, trusting the water to weave it back into the universe's endless tapestry. The Jordan River holds a different kind of magic. Here, the water isn't just a purifier, it's a threshold. When John the Baptist plunged believers beneath its surface 2,000 years ago, the act wasn't about cleaning dirt from skin. It was a ritual drowning, a symbolic death of the old self so a new one could gasp its first breath. Modern pilgrims still wade into the same bends, their white robes ballooning around them like cocoons. The water's chill shocks the system, mimicking life's sudden turns. But what's fascinating is how this ritual mirrors others across the globe. In Japan's icy Misogi Falls, Shinto practitioners stand under pounding torrents to purify their spirits. The Amazon's Shipibo people drink ayahuasca near Blackwater tributaries, believing the tea's visions flow from the river's own consciousness. Water doesn't discriminate. It baptizes, heals, and transforms anyone who enters with reverence. Yet water's power isn't just in its gentleness. The Nile's annual floods could drown villages but also left behind fertile silt that fed kingdoms. The Tigris and Euphrates gave birth to Mesopotamian civilization until their shifting courses erased cities from the map. This duality made water the ultimate teacher of impermanence. The Maori tell of Taniwa, serpentine spirits that guard whirlpools, reminding travelers that respect must temper desire. In Bali, Subak irrigation temples balance water distribution between farms, a sacred compromise echoing the Hindu principle of Tri-Hita Karana harmony between humans, nature, and the divine. Even the act of offering flowers to rivers acknowledges this balance, beauty given, then surrendered to the current. Modern science unravels why these rituals resonate. Water's molecular structure changes when exposed to prayer or music, its crystals forming intricate geometric patterns. Our bodies are 60% water, essentially walking rivers ourselves. Maybe that's why the sound of rain soothes us, or why we're drawn to lake shores at dusk. Some ancient part of us still believes what the Babylonians carved into clay tablets, that the first gods were born from sweet and saltwater mingling. Every ritual at a riverbank isn't just tradition. It's a homecoming, so the next time you cup water in your hands, pause, feel its weight, its memory. Whether it's a glacier-fed stream or a monsoon-swollen canal, it carries the same truth our ancestors knew. To love water is to love change. To trust it is to surrender to the current of existence, where every ending is a beginning in disguise. The stones at Karnak don't just stand, they count. Over 3,000 weathered granite sentinels march across the Breton coastline in perfect rows, each one aligned to catch the solstice sunrise like a celestial abacus. To call them primitive is to miss their genius. These weren't just markers for rituals, they were Neolithic spreadsheets, their shadows stretching and shrinking to predict planting seasons, eclipse cycles, even tidal patterns for coastal fishing. The same stone that anchored a druid's cloak could also function as a calendar, a calculator, and a conduit to the dead. Consider the Callanish stones on Scotland's Isle of Lewis, their cruciform pattern mirroring the shape of the Milky Way during the Bronze Age. At dawn on the summer solstice, the central monolith casts a shadow that pierces the heart of the formation, a stone dagger pointing to where the Pleiades would rise weeks later. This wasn't accidental artistry, it was sacred engineering, a three-dimensional almanac carved by people who read the night sky like we read street signs. The Maori have a word for this, wakapapa. It means both genealogy and geology, the understanding that every rock holds the memory of those who touched it. What's startling is how these megaliths functioned as collective hard drives. In West Africa's Senegambia region, laterite stone circles were placed over burials with such precision that each arrangement corresponds to specific clan lineages. Walking among them is like reading a family tree written in granite. The Native American petroglyphs at Newspaper Rock weren't just art, they were educational tools, teaching generations how to track game migrations through seasonal star movements. Even the act of quarrying these stones was ritualized. The bluestones at Stonehenge were hauled from Welsh hills over 150 miles away, not because closer rocks were unavailable, but because the journey itself was a pilgrimage, each scrape and fracture in the stone believed to encode the struggles of those who transported it. Modern laser scans reveal secrets our ancestors knew instinctually. The cup and ring marks carved into European megaliths, their mathematical models of lunar cycles, their concentric circles predicting eclipses centuries in advance. The acoustics of Maltese temples amplified chanting at specific frequencies, creating vibrations that resonate deep in the chest, a physical echo of the divine. These weren't just places of worship. They were universities where astronomy, agriculture, and ancestor veneration converged. Yet the greatest lesson these stones teach isn't about the past, but the future. In an age where digital storage degrades within decades, the Callanish stones have preserved their data for 5,000 years through blizzards, wars, and rising seas. They challenge our obsession with the new by proving that sometimes the oldest technologies are the most enduring. The next time you see a standing stone, press your palm against its sun-warmed surface. That's not just rock you're feeling, it's a hard drive still humming with ancient wisdom, waiting for someone to listen. The first dancers didn't move to music, they became it. When the San people of the Kalahari entered their healing trance dances, their stomping feet didn't just beat rhythm into the dust. Their trembling bodies channeled the energy of the praying mantis, their ancestor spirit, every shudder and sweat-drenched convulsion pulling sickness from the community like venom from a wound. This wasn't entertainment. It was ecology in motion, human bodies transforming into conduits for forces larger than themselves. Across the Pacific, Hawaiian hula dancers swayed like coconut palms in the trade winds, their hip rolls tracing ocean currents, their hand flourishes mapping the flight paths of migratory birds. Each gesture held meaning deeper than words, encoding navigation charts, weather patterns, and creation myths in the curve of a wrist. Consider the whirling dervishes of Turkey, their white skirts billowing like milk spilled across a midnight sky. As they spun, always counterclockwise, mirroring Earth's rotation, their right palms turned upward to receive heaven's grace, while left palms faced downward to channel it into the world. A single dancer might revolve over 100 times in ceremony, not as spectacle but as living axis between realms. Modern physics now echoes what these mystics knew in their bones: everything spins. Electrons orbit nuclei, planets circle stars, galaxies spiral through the void. The dervish wasn't performing, he was synchronizing. Then there's the Pueblo corn dances of the American Southwest, where every step was agriculture in motion. Dancers wearing squash blossom headdresses dipped and rose like stalks in the wind, their feet pressing prayers into the soil with each stomp. The intricate footwork wasn't arbitrary. It mapped irrigation patterns, teaching water distribution through movement generations before textbooks existed. Meanwhile, in West Africa, Yoruba Egungun masqueraders swirled in multi-layered cloth, embodying ancestral spirits so fully that witnesses swore the dancers levitated. Their costumes weren't disguises but portals, their rustling fabrics mimicking the sound of leaves in the sacred groves where the dead were believed to dwell. What unites these traditions is the understanding that dance wasn't separate from nature, it was an extension of nature's own movements. The Aboriginal Corroboree's kangaroo hops weren't imitation but invocation, calling game animals through sympathetic magic. The annual bear festival dances of Japan didn't just honor the slain beast, they ensured its spirit would return in future hunts by perfectly recreating its lumbering gait. Even the seemingly chaotic leaping of Siberian shamans followed strict patterns, their jumps timed to the arrhythmic drumbeats that mirrored a reindeer's heartbeat during the rutting season. Modern neuroscience reveals why these movements felt transcendent. Rhythmic dancing releases endorphins and synchronizes brain waves among participants, creating what anthropologists call communitas, a shared altered state. The vestibular system in our inner ears, responsible for balance, also connects to memory centers, explaining why certain motions can trigger ancestral recall. When Balinese dancers flick their eyes like darting fish or Maori warriors thrust their tongues like challenging birds, they're not just performing, they're activating something primal within both dancer and witness. Perhaps that's why flash mobs and ecstatic dance classes are surging in concrete jungles today. In a world where most of us move only from screen to seat to bed, our bodies remember what our minds have forgotten. That to dance is to speak the earth's oldest language. Every twirl contains a tornado, every stomp echoes thunder, every undulation holds the memory of waves that rocked our species into being. The rituals may have faded, but the truth remains. We don't just observe nature. We are nature dancing. Masks weren't carved to hide faces. They were made to reveal what lay beneath them. When a Kwakwaka'wakwa dancer in the Pacific Northwest slipped on a cedar wood raven mask, the transformation wasn't symbolic. The creak of hinges as the beak opened wasn't stagecraft. It was the sound of a human throat becoming a raven's cry. In that moment, the dancer didn't portray the trickster bird, they channeled it. Their movements shifting from human steps to avian hops, their laughter dissolving into croaks that echoed through the longhouse like wind through old growth trees. Across the Bering Strait, Yupik shamans wore walrus ivory masks so heavy with spiritual power that ordinary villagers couldn't look directly at them without risking soul sickness. These weren't costumes, they were vessels. The materials themselves held meaning. A Dan mask from Liberia, hewn from sacred sasswood, absorbed the energy of every ritual it witnessed, its polished surface growing darker with each ceremony like a spiritual patina. In Japan's No theater, a master carver might spend years hollowing out a single block of cypress, knowing the mask's hollow eyes would only come alive when worn by an actor who'd spent decades mastering the slightest tilt of the chin. The transformation wasn't in the carving, but in the wearing, the way moonlight caught the mask's grooves differently than sunlight, making a demon's snarl soften into a god's smile with a turn of the head. This fluidity of identity shocked early European colonizers, who documented devilish disguises with equal parts fascination and fear. What they missed was the profound empathy encoded in these rituals. To wear a buffalo mask in a Plains Indian Sundance wasn't just to honor the animal, it was to experience the weight of its hooves, the ache of its gallop, the gratitude for its sacrifice. A Siberian shaman's reindeer antler headdress didn't just symbolize a spirit guide, it gave the wearer the animal's panoramic vision, its sensitivity to shifting winds, its uncanny sense of direction across trackless tundra. The mask was a teacher, and the lesson was always the same. To know the world, you had to become it. Modern neuroscience hints at why these transformations felt so real. When actors lose themselves in roles, their brain activity shifts to mirror the emotions they're portraying. The sensory deprivation of a mask, the way it narrows vision and muffles sound, can induce trance-like states. Even children instinctively understand this power, slipping into dinosaur growls or fairy whispers with just a paper bag over their heads. Our brains are wired for metamorphosis. Perhaps that's why these rituals still resonate. In Venice's Carnival, where masks erase class distinctions, or Mexico's Day of the Dead, where skull-faced revelers dance with ancestors, the old magic lingers. We've traded cedar and ivory for plastic and latex, but the urge remains to step outside ourselves, if only for a night, and remember what we've forgotten, that every leaf, every stone, every creature is just another face waiting to be worn. A flock of birds wheeling across the sky wasn't just a spectacle to the ancient Romans, it was a telegram from the gods. Augurs, trained in the sacred art of ornithomancy, would climb the steps of the Capitoline Hill, their eyes locked on the horizon. The way eagles circled, the angle of a woodpecker's flight, even the direction a sparrow fled, every motion carried meaning. A sudden veer to the left might cancel a battle, while vultures perched on a temple's eastern wall could signal a year of plenty. This wasn't superstition, it was ecology as scripture, written in wings and wind currents. Half a world away, Chinese oracle bone diviners took a different approach. They pressed red-hot bronze rods into turtle plastrons, listening for the crackle of splitting shell. The fractures weren't random. They formed branching patterns that scribes translated into poetry, recording everything from harvest forecasts to royal toothaches on the very bones that predicted them. What's astonishing is how often these prophecies proved true. Modern paleoclimatologists comparing shell cracks to weather records found they accurately predicted droughts, suggesting the diviners were reading subtle stress lines caused by seasonal changes in the turtles' habitats. The shells weren't just mystical objects, they were ecological barometers. The Norse took their cues from trees, carving runes from birch or yew. They'd cast them onto white cloth, interpreting the way they landed like a forest's whisper. A reversed Berkana rune might warn of a blighted crop, while alga's touching Raidho could promise safe passage through stormy seas. But the materials mattered as much as the symbols. Ash wood runes were best for justice, apple wood for love, oak for protection, each tree's spirit lending its voice to the reading. When a rune stick was buried with its owner, it wasn't just a grave good. It was a compass for the afterlife, its grain still humming with earthly wisdom. Even today, these practices linger in disguised forms. Farmers watching the way squirrels build nests to predict winter severity are practicing a kind of dendromancy. Surfers reading wave patterns continue the tradition of hydromancy, the ancient art of water divination. And when we joke about waiting for a sign, we're echoing the Etruscan haruspices who scrutinized lightning strikes for divine messages. The methods have changed, but the instinct remains to see nature not as a backdrop, but as an active participant in our stories. What unites all these traditions is the belief that the earth isn't silent. A cracked turtle shell, a rustling oak branch, a formation of geese, these weren't random events to our ancestors. They were sentences in an ongoing conversation. We've swapped rune casting for weather apps, but the longing persists. To stand under an open sky and feel, just for a moment, that the clouds might be trying to tell us something. The first loaves baked after harvest weren't just food, they were flesh of the earth itself. At the Greek Thesmophoria, women carried sacred barley cakes shaped like genitals through the fields, burying them to ensure next year's fertility. Each crumbling bite was a covenant. As the grain had died in the soil, so would it rise again in their bodies. This wasn't metaphor. When Demeter's priestesses ate those coarse loaves, they believed they were consuming the goddess's power, her grief for Persephone transmuted into nourishment. Half a continent away, Celtic families gathering for Lugnasad passed a single oat bannock hand to hand, not because food was scarce, but because sharing it wove invisible threads between them, stitching the group into a living tapestry of reciprocity. Consider the Native American green corn ceremonies, where every kernel held generations of wisdom. Before eating the year's first maize, Cherokee elders would recite the entire history of its cultivation, how the Selu spirit had bled corn from her body to feed her people, how seeds had been carried through the trail of tears in secret pouches. The act of chewing became an act of memory, each mouthful connecting them to ancestors who had tasted the same sweetness under different skies. Similarly, in Japan's Nianame-sai festival, the emperor still offers the season's first rice to Amaterasu, the sun goddess, before any human may eat. The ritual isn't quaint tradition, it's a kinetic reminder that every calorie of energy in that grain originated from sunlight's alchemy. What's startling is how these feasts mirrored agricultural science. The Yoruba New Yam festival included a 3-day fast before consumption, allowing gut microbiomes to reset for optimal nutrient absorption. Aztec chocolate rituals mixed cacao with chili to enhance flavonoids' bioavailability. Even the Jewish Passover Seder's bitter herbs and unleavened bread followed an ancient understanding of spring's detoxifying effects on winter-weary bodies. These weren't just symbolic meals, they were functional medicine encoded in ceremony. Modern farm-to-table movements unknowingly resurrect these instincts. When a chef butchers a hog at the table in a nose-to-tail dinner, they're reviving the Norse blot feasts where every organ was honored. Community-supported agriculture shares mirror the Inca's Mita system, where villagers pooled crops in communal storehouses. Even the act of photographing food before eating echoes the Tibetan tradition of offering meals to deities through visual contemplation before consumption. Yet something vital has been lost in translation. Ancient feasts weren't about individual taste, they were about cosmic balance. The Babylonian Akitu festival redistributed temple stockpiles to the poor, ensuring no one ate until all could eat. Hawaiian Makahiki celebrations suspended all warfare for 4 months of shared harvest games. These meals didn't just fill stomachs, they recalibrated society. Perhaps that's why Thanksgiving dinners still feel hollow without gratitude, or why fast food leaves us hungry at a cellular level. The rituals taught what we're relearning, that true nourishment isn't measured in calories but in connections, to the hands that grew it, the seasons that shaped it, and the earth that dreamed it into being long before we took our first bite. Death isn't an end, it's an offering. High on the Tibetan plateau, where the air is too thin for wood to burn and the ground too frozen to dig, sky burials unfold with stark beauty. A monk's chants mingle with the whistle of Himalayan winds as the Rajyapa, the body breaker, prepares the deceased. With meticulous strokes, flesh is separated from bone, not in cruelty but in sacred practicality. Vultures circle, then descend not as scavengers but as dakinis, celestial messengers who carry the soul upward on broad wings. Within hours, what was once a person has become rain, becoming grass, becoming the breath of yaks grazing on distant slopes. This isn't abandonment, it's the oldest form of recycling, a belief that the body's final act should be to nourish the web it once walked upon. In Mumbai's Malabar Hill, the Parsi Towers of Silence take this philosophy to its logical extreme. Built over 5 centuries ago, these circular stone platforms elevate the dead beyond earthly corruption. Vultures, now tragically scarce due to pesticide poisoning, once reduced a body to bones in under an hour, their acidic stomachs purifying what fire or soil might taint. Zoroastrians call this Dokmanashani, the ultimate act of environmental charity. To pollute the earth with decaying flesh would be sacrilege. Better to let winged purifiers return atoms to the sky. Even the bones, bleached by sun and wind, are later gathered and dissolved in lime, completing the cycle without a single molecule wasted. Modernity is catching up to these ancient wisdoms. In Sweden's eco-cemeteries, mourners can now bury loved ones in pods of mycelium-infused bark, their bodies becoming nutrients for birch or pine saplings planted above. Italian designers have crafted egg-shaped burial capsules that transform cemeteries into forests, each tree marking a life's continuation rather than its end. Even cremation is being reimagined. California's Recompose facility uses microbial activity to gently convert bodies into soil over 30 days, yielding enough rich compost to fill a pickup truck. The process mirrors what happens naturally in forest floors, just accelerated with the precision of modern science. What unites these practices is a quiet rebellion against the modern cult of preservation. Embalming, sealed caskets, and concrete vaults aren't just expensive, they're ecological dissonance, freezing the body in a futile resistance against nature's pull. Contrast this with the Maori tradition of wrapping the dead in flax mats, their decomposition feeding the pungent, life-teeming soil of Yoruba burial grounds. Or the Lakota practice of placing offerings of tobacco with the body, ensuring the spirit's journey is mirrored by physical elements returning to the earth. These rituals don't shy from decay, they honor it as the necessary counterpart to growth. Perhaps the most poignant metaphor comes from the Jains of India, who view death as the final act of non-possession. Monks of the Salakana tradition voluntarily cease eating at life's end, their gradual thinning away a conscious release of all material bonds. As their bodies diminish, they meditate on the countless microorganisms that will reclaim them, not with horror but with gratitude. In this light, decomposition isn't oblivion. It's the universe's most intimate act of sharing, where every atom gets another chance to dance in sunlight, swim in rivers, or soar in the lungs of a laughing child. The lesson whispered by these traditions is disarmingly simple. We were never meant to be separate. The same carbon in our bones once blazed in stars and will one day pulse in maple leaves or seashells. Burial rites that return us to nature aren't just poetic, they are precise acknowledgments of a truth we've always known but sometimes forget. Death doesn't sever our connection to the living world. It deepens it, folding us back into the soil's dark embrace where endings are always, inevitably, beginnings in disguise. The earth doesn't give birth, it is birth. When Neolithic villagers buried figurines of swollen-hipped goddesses in their fields, they weren't worshipping fertility as an abstract concept. They were acknowledging the raw, creative force that pushed roots through soil and blood through wombs with the same relentless rhythm. The Minoans called her Potnia, the Lady of the Labyrinth, her serpent-coiled arms cradling both harvest and hunter. In Vedic hymns, Prithvi, the vast mother, was inseparable from Dyaus, the sky father, their union literally holding up the world. This wasn't primitive personification. It was acute observation. The way storms impregnate dry earth with rain mirrors the way passion ignites life. The priestesses who tended Demeter's shrines knew this intimately. Their rituals strewing barley on freshly turned soil, weaving wheat stalks into bridal crowns weren't just symbolic. They were collaborations with a force that demanded both reverence and reciprocity. Yet for every Earth Mother, there was a sky-bound counterpart. The Druids didn't just revere oaks as masculine symbols. They saw them as living lightning rods, channeling the fierce intellect of Tyrones the Thunderer. His energy wasn't opposed to the Earth's softness, it complemented it. Lightning fixes nitrogen into soil. Storms carve rivers that nourish valleys. The Yoruba captured this duality perfectly. Oshun's honey-sweet rivers flow between Shango's fiery tempests, their clashes producing not destruction but lush rainforests. These traditions understood what modern ecology confirms: ecosystems thrive on dynamic tension, not dominance. Some cultures took this further, recognizing that nature itself resists binary boxes. The two spirit people of indigenous North America moved fluidly between genders, their roles as healers and mediators reflecting the natural world's own diversity: hermaphroditic earthworms, sex-changing clownfish, the way willow branches bend both masculine and feminine in the wind. In India's Hara communities, sacred to the goddess Bahachara Mata, trans women preserved ancient temple dances that celebrated this fluidity long before colonial laws erased it. Even the Norse had their Seder workers, male shamans who wore women's clothing to tap into Freyja's magic, proving that wisdom wears many skins. What's revolutionary about these traditions isn't just their inclusivity, it's their realism. Modern gender roles often feel imposed, but these rituals grew from observing actual ecosystems. Female lions hunt, male seahorses gestate. Ancient rites mirrored these truths, offering roles as varied as nature itself. Athenian women brewing psychedelic kykeon for Eleusinian mysteries. Inuit gender-neutral shamans interpreting dreams carried by the aurora. Aztec priestesses of Coatlicue wielding sacrificial knives alongside priests of Huitzilopochtli. The balance wasn't about equality as sameness, but as harmony, like sunlight and shadow sharing the same forest floor. Perhaps that's why these archetypes still resonate. When a modern gardener talks to her seedlings or a storm chaser shouts prayers into the wind, they're channeling something primal. Not stereotypes, but deep patterns. The way a river can be both nurturing and destructive. The way a mountain stands firm yet weathers with grace. The earth never demanded conformity. It only asked for presence, for humans to recognize themselves as part of its endless, gendered, gloriously messy becoming. A boy stands at the edge of the savannah, his spear trembling not from fear but from the weight of expectation. For the Maasai, the lion hunt isn't just a test of courage, it's a conversation. The warrior-to-be doesn't seek to conquer the beast, but to meet its gaze and recognize a kindred spirit. If he succeeds, he'll take only what's needed: a single claw, a tuft of mane, leaving the carcass for hyenas and vultures. This moment isn't about killing, it's about kinship. The lion's roar becomes his first language of responsibility, teaching what no classroom could. True strength lies in restraint. Meanwhile, in the Amazon's Green Cathedral, A Shipibo girl swallows bitter ayahuasca under the moon's watch. For 3 nights, the vines sing to her in geometric patterns, their visions revealing which plants will answer her future patient's fevers or heartaches. When she emerges, blinking in the dawn light, she doesn't just carry new knowledge, she carries the forest itself in her bones. Like the Maasai warrior, her initiation wasn't about conquering nature, but about listening to it until it whispered her name. These rituals share a common thread: solitude as teacher. The Lakota vision quest strips away every distraction: no food, no shelter, just 4 days and nights on a windswept bluff. Hunger sharpens the senses, thirst cleanses the mind. When the eagle finally circles overhead or the wolf appears between the rocks, it isn't fantasy. It's the land itself speaking, offering the initiate their life's compass. Modern psychology confirms what these traditions knew: isolation primes the brain for profound neuroplasticity. The visions aren't hallucinations, they're the psyche's deepest wisdom, surfacing when the chatter fades. Yet these rites weren't just personal transformations, they were ecological contracts. A young Apache tracking deer for the first time wasn't just learning to hunt. He was memorizing the herd's migratory routes, the locations of water sources, the subtlest signs of ecosystem health. His coming of age doubled as conservation training, ensuring he'd safeguard these patterns for future generations. Similarly, Maori teens navigating by star and wave during their solo waka voyages weren't merely proving survival skills. They were forging neural pathways that tied their identities to the rhythms of tides and constellations. Today's substitutes, driver's licenses, graduation ceremonies pale in comparison. They measure competence but rarely connection. A teenager scrolling through social media might accumulate likes, but when has a smartphone ever taught them to read the warning cry of a jaybird or the scent of rain on dry soil? The absence of these thresholds leaves a void, one we've tried to fill with extreme sports or backpacking trips. Yet even these adventures often prioritize conquest over communion, summiting peaks for selfies rather than sitting silently to hear what the mountain might say. Perhaps that's why rewilding programs are gaining traction, taking urban kids into forests to relearn what their ancestors never forgot. In Norway, friluftsliv, open-air living, is woven into school curricula, with teens camping solo through all seasons. Some Native American communities are revising Vision Quest protocols, adapting them for reservation youth navigating the dual challenges of tradition and modernity. Even the simple act of gardening can become a rite when approached with reverence, planting a seed and tending it to harvest mirrors the ancient cycle of deprivation and revelation. The question isn't whether we still need these rituals, but whether we can afford to live without them. When a Maasai elder says, "A man who hasn't faced the lion doesn't know the weight of life," he isn't romanticizing danger. He's stating a fact we've obscured. Adulthood isn't just about independence, but interdependence. The lion, the vine, the eagle, they weren't just challenges to overcome. They were mirrors reflecting back the wild, wondrous truth that to be human is to belong to something far greater than ourselves. Concrete can't silence what the soil remembers. Beneath Tokyo's neon skyline, office workers still pause beneath cherry blossoms each spring, their bento boxes and briefcases forgotten as pink petals drift onto their suits like snow. This isn't just a picnic, it's hanami, a 1,000-year-old ritual where the brief, blazing beauty of sakura mirrors life's fleeting nature. The same bankers who analyze stock charts by day can tell you the exact moment their local trees will hit peak bloom, their spreadsheets momentarily swapped for poetry. Across the ocean in Manhattan, the High Line's wildflowers push through railroad tracks, their roots cradled in grooves where steel wheels once screamed. What was industrial decay is now sacred ground. Morning joggers instinctively slow to a walk when passing the butterfly garden, their pounding sneakers softening to reverent steps. These urban rituals aren't feeble imitations of wilderness worship. They're adaptations, proving that devotion doesn't require pristine forests. When Londoners scatter wildflower seeds along bombing sites from the Blitz, they're continuing the Druid practice of healing wounded land, only now with seed bombs instead of oak branches. Bangkok's Sky Train commuters press jasmine garlands into temple cracks the same way their ancestors tucked flowers into jungle shrines. Even the humble balcony herb garden follows an ancient blueprint. Medieval monks grew medicinal plants in cloister courtyards, their stone walls echoing today's fire escapes. The most radical acts often go unnoticed. A Brooklyn barber nurturing honeybees on his tar paper roof revives the Egyptian tradition of temple apiaries, where priestesses tended hives as living symbols of community. Barcelona's guerrilla gardeners planting tomatoes in traffic circles unknowingly mirror the Incas' urban chakras, where maize grew between stone palaces. That woman meditating under a ginkgo tree in Seoul's financial district, her stillness continues the Zen practice of moss gazing, where monks would contemplate lichen patterns until the boundary between observer and observed dissolved. What's extraordinary is how these practices reshape cities biologically. Studies show that neighborhoods with community gardens have higher pollinator diversity than some rural areas. The dandelions pushing through sidewalk cracks, creating micro-sanctuaries for bees. Tokyo's cherry trees lower street temperatures by 2 degrees Celsius during Hanami season, their petals forming a cooling pink insulation. When New Orleans residents paint rainwater harvesting murals on abandoned buildings, they're reviving the West African tradition of turning walls into hydrological maps, guiding storms like ancient river deities. This isn't nostalgia, it's necessity. Psychologists find that office workers with window views of trees take fewer sick days, their cortisol levels mirroring forest bathers in Nagano. Philadelphia's Clean and Green vacant lot program, where residents transform trash-filled spaces into mini meadows, reduced gun violence by nearly 30% in some areas. The data confirms what rituals have always known. We don't just need nature to survive, we need it to remember who we are. Perhaps that's why the most cutting-edge urban design now looks backward. Singapore's vertical forests drape skyscrapers in ferns and orchids, recreating the hanging gardens of Babylon with solar-powered irrigation. Milan's Bosco Verticale apartments house more tree species than most Italian national parks, their balconies designed as modern sacred groves. Even Dubai's futuristic Museum of the Future grows its own food in aeroponic towers, the scent of basil and za'atar rising through climate-controlled halls, a high-tech echo of the Babylonian ziggurat gardens where priests once cultivated mandrakes under moonlight. The lesson hums beneath every subway track and sprouts between every pavement crack. Wilderness was never just a place, it's a practice. When we kneel to weed a sidewalk planter or save a drowning earthworm after summer rain, we're not just tending plants, we're tending our own roots. The rituals change their clothes, but the heartbeat remains the same. Concrete can cover the ground, but it can't stop the seeds. Climate grief weighs more than carbon in the atmosphere. It lodges in the throat, thick as smoke. In Norway's Svalbard archipelago, where glaciers crumble like sandcastles, a woman kneels on still, warm bedrock recently exposed after 40,000 years. She presses her palms to the ground, not in prayer but in witness, whispering the names of extinct lichens as her tears mingle with meltwater. This is the Ice Memorial, a growing practice where mourners hold funerals for vanishing landscapes, their eulogies carried by wind to ears that may or may not be listening. Half a world away in Australia's burning eucalyptus forests, indigenous rangers revive an ancient Jab Wurrung ceremony, smoking seedlings before planting to wake up their ancestral memory. These rituals aren't about reversing the irreversible. They're about reshaping despair into something with handles, a grief you can hold, a rage you can channel. The Council of All Beings takes this further, transforming conference halls into ecosystems. Participants don masks crafted from river mud and crow feathers, speaking not as humans but as melting permafrost, as choked coral reefs, as last-generation monarch butterflies. When a lawyer embodying the Colorado River rasps, "I used to carve canyons, now I barely reach the sea," the room shudders with a truth no spreadsheet could convey. Psychologists call this embodied cognition, the neural alchemy that occurs when metaphor becomes muscle memory. The man who spent an hour voicing a mangrove's lament will fight for wetlands with a ferocity no abstract statistic ever inspired. This revival isn't confined to grassroots movements. The Catholic Church now designates creation masses, where hymns praise phytoplankton's oxygen production. Bhutan's monks track snow leopard populations alongside biologists, their prayer wheels spinning with radio collar data. Even Silicon Valley engineers host Anthropocene exorcisms, coding algorithms by day while designing digital totems to honor extinct species at night. The through line, recognizing that policy without poetry starves the soul, and activism without awe burns out the heart. Traditionalists might scoff, dismissing glacier funerals as performative. But consider the alternative, the paralyzing numbness that comes with doomscroll statistics. Ritual creates a container where overwhelming data becomes manageable story, where the loss of 3 billion birds since 1970 isn't just a headline, but a procession of shadow puppets against a sunset, each silhouette a vanished song. When Hawaiian elders chant for shrinking fish stocks, their meal aren't literal calls to fish gods. They're neural bridges rewiring participants' brains to associate marine depletion with visceral loss. Science confirms what ceremony intuited. Studies at Yale's Climate Change Communication Program found that people who participated in ecological rituals, even secular ones, showed 23% higher engagement in conservation efforts than those who only received factual briefings. MRI scans reveal that ritual activates the brain's insula, the region responsible for interoception, our sense of connection to larger systems. Essentially, chanting for rivers or mourning glaciers doesn't just feel meaningful. It biologically recalibrates our relationship to the natural world. The most radical rituals aren't those that ask for miracles, but those that forge responsibility. In the Ecuadorian Andes, Quichua women sow seeds into the bellies of clay figurines before planting them in eroded soil, a tactile promise to nurture what they've buried. Seattle's urban ghost salmon processions paint blue fish silhouettes on streets where streams once flowed, turning asphalt into a canvas of collective memory. These acts acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. We won't save what we don't love, and we can't love what we've stopped seeing. By dressing extinction in ceremony, we give it a face we can finally grieve, and in that grief find the will to fight. The glow of a smartphone screen at midnight might seem a far cry from firelight flickering on cave walls, but the impulse remains the same, to make meaning from the tools at hand. In a Tokyo research lab, engineers gather before an AI trained on 10,000 years of Shinto prayers, feeding it wind patterns and birdsong data to generate new invocations for climate change ceremonies. The code isn't mere programming, it's woven with fragments of the Kojiki, Japan's oldest chronicle, so the machine's outputs hum with the rhythm of ancient priestesses. Critics call it sacrilege, but the developers argue they're building digital Torii gates. portals where silicon and spirit might meet without diminishing either. Meanwhile, in Reykjavik, a group of VR artists recreate the Norse myth of Yggdrasil, not as a game but as a meditative space. Wearing headsets, participants climb the world tree's roots, each branch revealing real-time ecological data. Melting permafrost translated into cracking bark, carbon levels affecting the hue of virtual leaves. The ritual ends with users planting actual birch saplings whose GPS coordinates are etched into the simulation, binding the digital and organic. It's a modern take on the Viking blot, where every virtual action must be balanced by tangible reciprocity. This movement raises thorny questions. Can an algorithm ever truly be sacred? The Cherokee Nation's recent battle against AI-generated spiritual teachings highlights the risks colonialism repackaged as code. Yet when Maori programmers embed Whakapapa genealogical protocols into environmental monitoring AIs, ensuring data honors ancestral land bonds, the technology becomes less a replacement for tradition than its amplifier. Perhaps the test lies in directionality. Does the ritual turn us outward, like a compass needle trembling toward true north? The most promising experiments function as bridges, not escapes. Stanford's Biohack Your Breath workshops teach participants to convert their exhalations into real-time soundscapes, revealing how human respiration mirrors forest carbon cycles. The resulting music, played back through speakers hidden in redwood groves, becomes a duet between lungs and leaves. Similarly, Berlin's Schrödinger's Garden app overlays quantum physics principles onto urban parks, walking certain paths collapses digital wildflowers into bloom, teaching probabilistic thinking through the cadence of footsteps on soil. These aren't abandonments of nature, but translations. Just as medieval monks painstakingly copied herbal knowledge onto vellum, we're encoding ecological wisdom into new mediums. The danger isn't technology itself, but the illusion of detachment, the belief that VR forests absolve us from protecting real ones. Yet when a teenager's augmented reality vision quest leads them to join a river cleanup, or when blockchain-based carbon prayer wheels fund solar projects with each digital rotation, the circle completes. The sacred was never about the material, but the intention woven through it. Perhaps the question isn't whether algorithms can be holy, but whether we'll use them to widen our circle of reverence. A Tibetan prayer wheel spun by hand or wind carries the same mantras. The vessel matters less than the devotion turning it. Our tools have always been mirrors. What they reflect now, more than ever, is our choice to wield them as walls against the wild or as lenses bringing its whispers into sharper focus. Your morning coffee doesn't have to be just caffeine, it can be communion. Holding the warm mug as dawn breaks, feeling steam rise like mist off a river, you're already part of a ritual older than temples. The Japanese call this ikigo iki, one time, one meeting, the practice of treating each mundane act as a sacred encounter. No dogma required, just tilt your cup toward the rising sun before sipping, a silent toast to the day. This tiny gesture shifts the axis of your attention, turning habit into homage. Consider the way you walk. Most of us stride from point A to B, earbuds sealing us off from the world. But what if each step became deliberate? The Sami people of Scandinavia measured distance in Poronkusuma, how far a reindeer can travel before needing to urinate. It's a reminder that movement isn't just about speed, it's about rhythm, about listening to the body's dialogue with the land. Try this next time you're outdoors, match your breath to your footsteps. Inhale for 3 paces, exhale for 4. Suddenly, you're not just walking, you're in conversation. Moonlight has its own language. In Bali, farmers still plant by the lunar calendar, their hands moving in sync with tides they can't see but know are there. You don't need a field to borrow this wisdom. Keep a notebook by your window, jotting down one observation each night as the moon waxes and wanes. Over weeks, patterns emerge, not just in the sky, but in your own thoughts. The Greeks knew this intimacy. Their word for moon, mean, shares roots with Mino's mind. They understood that celestial cycles mirror the tides within us. The real magic lies in reframing the ordinary. A backyard barbecue becomes an offering when you scatter the first bite for the crows, continuing the Norse tradition of blot. A houseplant isn't just decor when you hum to it, a practice backed by studies showing sound waves stimulate root growth. Even laundry can morph into ceremony if you hang clothes outside with the same care Tibetan monks drape prayer flags, letting wind and sunlight bless the fabric. What matters isn't the scale, but the sincerity. A single dandelion picked from a crack in the sidewalk and placed in a jar on your desk can be as potent as any temple offering if you truly see it, not as a weed, but as a survivor, a sun-colored rebel pushing through concrete. The land doesn't demand grand gestures. It asks only for presence, for the quiet recognition that every leaf, every stone, every gust of wind is part of an ongoing dialogue. Your rituals, however small, are simply your way of saying, I'm here, I'm listening. We've walked paths where trees hold counsel and stones keep time, where fire carries prayers and rivers remember every name ever whispered to their currents. This journey wasn't about uncovering lost traditions. It was about rediscovering a language we all still speak, even if we've forgotten the words. Every time you pause to watch a sunset, or feel your breath sink with ocean waves, or plant a seed with your child's hands guiding yours, you're adding to that ancient dialogue. These aren't relics, they're lifelines. The climate reports and extinction tallies can leave us numb, but rituals offer a way to transmute that overwhelm into action. When Brazilian activists replant mangroves with songs their great-grandmothers taught them, or when Swedish teens organize climate grief circles with candles and shared stories, they're doing more than protesting, they're rewiring the relationship between people and planet. Science gives us data, but ritual gives that data a heartbeat. It turns abstract statistics into stories we can carry in our bones. You don't need a ceremonial mask or a 1,000-year-old chant to begin. Start where you are. That potted basil on your windowsill, water it with the same attention a monk pours tea in a Zen garden, each drop a meditation. Notice how the leaves tilt toward light like tiny solar panels, how the scent lingers on your fingers like a green benediction. Or walk your neighborhood not for exercise, but as a surveyor of wonders, the way dandelions fracture concrete, the cursive of bird tracks on snow. THESE, Chinese letter rituals train the mind to see the world not as a backdrop, but as a living teacher. The most profound shift happens when we realize reciprocity isn't symbolic, it's survival. The Maori principle of Kaishiakatanga, guardianship, insists that every resource taken must be matched by protection given. Modern permaculture designs echo this, turning gardens into self-sustaining ecosystems where waste becomes food for another cycle. Even something as simple as leaving a patch of lawn unmowed for pollinators or saving rainwater in painted barrels becomes a daily ceremony of mutuality. What's thrilling is how these practices are evolving. Bio-artists crafting compostable mycelium coffins, programmers writing code that generates poems for endangered species, architects designing buildings that hum with the same resonant frequencies as ancient temples, all are weaving old wisdom into new forms. The sacred doesn't vanish when it changes shape, it adapts, insisting on relevance. So here's your invitation. Let your life become an ongoing conversation with the animate world. When you drink morning coffee, taste the mountain springs and clouds condensed in every sip. When you scroll through news of wildfires, pause to light a candle not as wishful thinking, but as a vow to carry that awareness into your choices. Share what you notice, a spider's web jeweled with dew, the way winter light slants through bare branches, as if these were bulletins from a front line that matters more than any stock report. The rituals we need now won't look like the past. They'll be messy, inventive, stitched together from science and intuition, and the stubborn belief that broken things can heal. But their essence remains the same. You are part of this world, not apart from it, and every gesture of attention, no matter how small, is a stitch in the fabric of connection. Now it's your turn. The earth is listening. What will you say?